Hi there everyone, welcome to week 8. This is practical number 3 in the GIS video series. If you're wondering why I'm slightly like a ghost and there's almost sparkles around me, I'm not a Twilight vampire, I'm also not a ghost. It's merely a case of trying to record while the lights are off. So there's load shedding and I've got spotlights on me, the UPS is running. So hopefully all will go well and we'll be able to have a video here or a video for this particular section, GIS number 3. Interestingly enough, this will probably be the easiest one of all the pracs, but it's also the most important one, because when you start thinking about making a map, now what we've been doing for the last few weeks is, for your submissions, you would have used the print screen button, and then you would have pasted your work into a document, whether it's PowerPoint or whether it's Word, and then you would have submitted that either as a PDF or as a PPT or whatever. However, when you do make a map, there are best practices. There are things that you need to include for that map to be useful. The first one, as we can see even from a brief, is a scale bar. We need to know what is the size of the map, also what are the spatial relationships between various points. In other words, what are the distances, right? Is it a kilometer? Are they 2 kilometers away from each other? Are we dealing with a small map? Is it a house plan, right? The bathroom is 3 meters by 5 meters. That's basically a plan, that's a map. The other thing that's very important is a legend. So we need to know, what are these symbols that we're using? What are we looking at? Is it a house? Are we looking at a river? Etc. And then also a north arrow. So the north arrow is important. Is this specific map orientated towards north, or is it orientated towards south? Generally speaking, we'll use a north arrow. That is just the convention. And then crucially, some title. A title that is brief and then tells you a little bit more about this specific map that you've prepared. Now, let's just quickly go through week 8 and the mapping exercise. So for instance, what we'll be doing for this exercise is we're going to add to our map, right? So you can use any of these. You can use the counties with anti-landing trenches. You can use this one. The counties highlighting Suffolk. You can do that one as well. That's a fairly easy one to make. Or you can just continue with the map that you were making during the previous practical, and that was using the Sutton Hoo burial mounds. And that's the one that I'm going to use today. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to make a map. And this is basically our little recipe. So we're going to use the composer. And this is essentially it. I'll be showing you how to add a map scale. And then also you'll obviously have to answer these questions in the quiz as well. Then we'll also add a north arrow, and then ultimately add the title. And then at the end of it, you should have a map, and a map that you can then save as a legitimate map. Alright, so that's going to be our task for this specific session. Now, as I've said, this is probably the easiest one, but it might be a little bit more time consuming, and there's a reason for it, and we're going to get to that in a second. Alright, so this is essentially what you should have ended up at the end of the last practical. For your practical, you wouldn't have done the added any labels. I just added the labels just for my own interest sake, and I added the labels for the mounts. You don't have to do that, but it's a fairly easy task. And if you want to know how to add the labels, you can definitely ask me. It's not a problem, and we can go through that. So you'll notice my river is nice and blue. The green is still not showing up because obviously my OBS, my recording software, has a thing against the color green, and I have a feeling it could possibly be because of the green screen that I use. and there's some sort of strange interference between the two. So for our practical, if you go to our brief, what we need to go and do is we need to go to our project menu. So there we've got our project menu, and we go all the way down to new print composer. So we're going to get this little field, and we can essentially name it whatever. It doesn't really matter at the moment, but just so long as we know what it is, I'm just going to call it Sutton Hoo, and I press OK. This is essentially our mapping composer. This is the designer, and this is what we're going to be using to actually create our map. So the first thing I want to do is I first want to reorientate this canvas. This is our canvas, almost like canvas that you use to print on. So you can go to Composer, and you'll see there's a couple of options here. We go down to Page Setup, and at the moment we actually have it on Landscape, and we have the size at A4. This means that if I made a map, it would actually be size A4, which is about the size of a normal page, or size A5, which is half of that, or a size A3, which is double the size of an A4 page. So I'm going to keep it at A4 for now, but for our purposes, we merely or purely need to change it from landscape to portrait. My personal preference is to make a map using landscape, but we'll go as the brief tells us. We'll note as well, I mean, nothing has really changed. But what we'll notice is that on this side, you'll have composition, item properties, and atlas generation. If we go to composition, we can actually do the same thing. We go paper quality, there's A4, the number of pages it will take, even the export resolution. Now obviously, just quickly about resolution, the higher the better, but the higher, for instance, if you choose 600 dpi, that will obviously create a much better map, but it will, the file size will be a lot higher. But I'm going to change my landscape to portrait, and immediately my canvas actually changes to now change to this orientation. So what comes next is adding our map. So the same thing that applies for the other one is if you don't know what the buttons are, you can hover over them, right? So there we have Pan Composer, we've got Zoom, Select, etc., etc. You'll see these different buttons in action in a second. So for the moment, I'm going to use this one, which is Add New Map, and I'm going to select an area, and it should select what is in QGIS at the moment, or what is actually active in QGIS at the moment. And in this case, it is my map. So you should be able to see my little map here. So you can essentially move it around, and you can make it a bit smaller. So you can change this item as you see fit. So the next thing I want to do is I actually want to add a scale. For our map, if we go back to QGIS, let's just see. If you look right in the corner, I hope you can see it, but if you look right at the bottom here, the scale for this image here, or the scale for this view here, is given right at the bottom here, and it says 125864. Now that's a very clumsy number, and generally speaking, when you make a map, you don't want to use numbers like that. You don't want to use a number like a ratio 1 to 5,400, 320. That's really not what you want. You want to have clean numbers. In other words, you want to have full numbers. So you would go for something like a scale of 1 to 25,000, or a scale of 1 to 5,000, or even if you're not dealing with a big map, 1 to 250,000. So that's something to think about in terms of your maps. So when we come here, I would like to make my scale reasonable, right? So, but for now, I'm just quickly going to add a scale. Now I can add my scale anywhere. I can put it here on the map itself, or alternatively, I can put it right at the bottom here. And I'm just putting it right at the bottom for now. And I'm just going to move it around. And my scale is actually quite nice because it's 100, 0, 100, 200, 300, 400. And these are all in meters. So you can basically see that this distance here is about 100 meters. Okay. Now let's say, for instance, you want to make any changes. If you've highlighted the scale, go to Item Properties. And in Item Properties, you can set what units you want. I'm going to choose meters for now. And then also you can choose, well, is it going to be by 2? And that changes it, 0 to 50 to 200 meters. It's still the same ultimately. It just changes the size of the scale. And obviously you can play around with it and see which one you actually want and which one's going to be the most useful for you. And then also there are other features, for instance, display. You can change this. I'm going to leave this up to you when you make your own map. And you can play around with the colors, you can play around with the fonts, and you can actually make something quite impressive. The other one that I'm going to want to add now is going to be my legend. And the legend's going to be a little bit interesting. So when I move down, I can say, okay, I can actually add an image. And adding an image would be interesting because we're dealing with a burial site or burial sites, and you can actually click on that one. If you have an image, for instance, of the burial sites, you can add it, and you can actually add it onto your map as well, right? You could definitely do that, and actually would look quite nice as well if it's probably from, you know, if you add a caption to it saying that this is Mount 11 or Mount 2 as some sort of example. So that would actually be a very nice addition. So you can add that, definitely. You can add an image. But for now, I just want to do the add a new legend. If I click on that, I can choose where to put my legend. And you'll notice my legend is massive. It is unbelievably massive. It is basically everything that we have so far that is in or what we've actually added to QGIS. And you'll notice the names still need to be changed, and it's a bit of a mess. And this is something that you need to clean up yourself. If I go to Item Properties, I can do an auto update, and you can remove the ones that you don't want. So for instance, pull box I don't want, this pull box I don't want, car charging points you might decide to take away, electricity named places, well, I want to keep that because that's where my names are coming from. Railway station you might want to take away. So I'm going to leave this up to you to decide what you want to add and what you want to remove. But the other key thing that you also want to do while you're doing this is you want to change the names. So what you want to do is you also want to rename them, and that is for the purposes of our legend. So here it used to be Prac 7 Mount Coordinates, but in actual fact what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it Sutton Hoo Burial Sites. And that automatically changes. And we can do it for all of these as well. And this is the task that you're going to have to do yourself. So you are going to have to see which ones of these vector entities or items you want to keep in or on your map. And then you also want to change the names of these items to appropriate names. So you want to make your legend as useful as possible. At the moment it's not useful. It has TM named place, TM road. I mean, these names mean absolutely nothing for someone else. You have to think about if someone else came along and they were to look at your map, you at least want them to understand what exactly this map is about. So that's going to be a task for you. And the task for you is to rename parts of this legend and to make the legend look a lot better. And I'm not going to do it for you. but I'm going to show, but I've shown you how to get there. The next thing we want to do is we want to add the north arrow. Now when we just click on it, and we can actually put an arrow wherever, but that is not a real north arrow. That is just an arrow. But if we want to make it a north arrow, there is something that we need to do. The first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that it actually orientates itself towards north. So for you to actually create a north arrow, you have to click on the button for arrow, but to orientate it towards the north, you have to hold down the shift key, and then it will essentially create a north arrow for you. Your placement of that north arrow depends on your preferences. You could put it on the canvas here, or alternatively, you can actually put it on the map itself to show that that is a north arrow. And then in terms of how you want to style it, all of that I will leave up to you. You can even use the text box to put a little N on top, and that will make it a north, right, to say that that's going to be north. That is something that I will leave up to you as well, to make your map look authentic, right? So it's all about making an authentic map. Then obviously the last thing that we want to add is really a title. And for this one, we use the text box, and we can actually just click it here. This is where I'm going to add my text. And I am going to write under main properties, this is where I can write that as a title. And then also you can change the font, you can make it bigger. You can make it bold. I think just for sake of completion, I'm just going to quickly just add an N here. It actually bothers me that there's no N for the north arrow, so let's just add our N. And then I'm just going to make that a font, make it bold. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Also, you can change obviously you can change your font if you want, and then see how it looks. Can make it a little bit bigger, I think. Let's go for 18. There we go. And there we go. So there we actually have our little north arrow with our little N right on top. What I want you to do is I want you to experiment and see what you can add. Experiment with your legend. See what items you can add to your legend, what items you can remove from your legend. And then once you're done with that, you can actually save all of this as a map, and you can upload it. Now obviously when you read through the brief, there is a requirement in terms of the font that you need to use. So you need to use the Arial's font, and it has to be for your title, Arial size 16. That's something to take note. Now I haven't done that, but I want you to do it. So I've shown you how to get there. Item properties, you can change the font, you can make the alignment horizontal, whoops, wrong one. Let's click on this one. You can make it center, vertical, etc. You can make your map canvas. You can have it all covered by the map. You can change the scale. You can make it 1 to 10,000. You can make it 1 to 20,000, depending on what you want to show on your map. And that, in essence, is basically Prac 8. And Prac 8, as I've said, is the easiest, but it's most likely going to take you a lot more time, because you're going to have to think about things. You're going to have to think about, what am I going to name the items within my legend? In other words, what title am I going to use? Or do I want to show these features in a bit more prominent light? Do I want to zoom in? Do I want to zoom out? Um, Interestingly enough, you can also add additional map features. So if you have two sessions of QGIS open, you can actually create overlays of maps. So you can have a map showing this area here, and then well, this area of Suffolk, and then you can create a small little map in the corner here that shows the whole of Britain, and then with Suffolk highlighted. That's something that you can do, and see if you can do that on your own. See if you can find a way to do that. I think that would be a nice challenge for you guys as well. That is it, really. This is Prac 8. As I've said, probably the easiest one, but it's definitely going to take you the longest. Have fun, guys, and I hope to see your maps. Thank you very much.